Catalina Reyes had always known how to read a room. It was a skill she developed young, sitting at the far end of a dinner table too long for a family of 3, watching her father hold court the way kings do, with easy authority and zero interest in contradiction. Warren Reyes was the kind of man who walked into a restaurant and got the best table without asking. He had that gravity, that pull. And for most of Catalina's 26 years, she had orbited him like a moon that had never once considered it might have its own light. She had done everything right. Graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern, turned down a marketing job at a Chicago firm to join her father's commercial real estate company, Reyes Group, as a junior analyst. She wore blazers. She spoke in boardroom language. She laughed at the right moments and stayed quiet during the rest. And still, she was invisible. Not to everyone. Her mother, Patricia, saw her, but Patricia had spent 30 years making herself smaller so Warren could feel larger. And her love, though real, had become a quiet, airless thing. Catalina's older brother, Derek, saw her too. But Derek had inherited their father's architecture of the world. Men build, women support. He wasn't cruel. He was just certain. It was a Tuesday in March when Catalina finally said the words out loud. She had been working on the concept for 8 months. A direct-to-consumer toy brand built around emotional intelligence, plush characters designed around feelings rather than fantasy. Worry, courage, loneliness, joy. Each toy came with a small illustrated book and a guided conversation card for parents. She had done the market research herself, nights and weekends, spreadsheets open beside half-eaten dinners. She had a manufacturer in Ohio, a web developer she'd met at a startup event, and pre-orders from 3 school districts that had seen her prototype at a local fair. She called it Heartfelt. She presented it at dinner. Not a pitch, just a conversation. She set a prototype on the table beside the breadbasket, a small golden bear with oversized eyes and the word brave stitched across its chest. Warren looked at it the way people look at roadkill. "You're leaving the firm," he said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation dressed up as clarification. "I'm keeping my position," Catalina said carefully. "I'd like to do this alongside, for toys." He picked up the bear with 2 fingers like it was evidence of a crime. "You went to Northwestern. You have a seat at a real company. And you want to sell stuffed animals to helicopter parents." Derek snorted. Actually snorted. Patricia said nothing. She reached for her water glass. "There's real data behind this, Dad. The emotional wellness market for children is, I don't care about the market." Warren set the bear down. "I care that my daughter is about to embarrass this family chasing a hobby." He paused, then landed the final blow with the particular precision of a man who had always known exactly where her soft places were. "Your grandfather built something real. I built something real. And you want to be remembered for a toy company." The table went quiet. Catalina picked up the bear. She folded her napkin. She said, "Okay, Dad," in the tone she had learned meant this conversation is over for you, not for me. She drove home with her hand steady on the wheel and the bear sitting in the passenger seat. It wasn't until she pulled into her apartment parking lot that she let herself cry not from sadness, but from something older and harder and much more dangerous. She wasn't hurt. She was done. What Catalina didn't know, what she couldn't have known yet, was that her father's mockery had been the appetizer. The main course came 6 weeks later, in the form of a phone call from her manufacturer in Ohio. Daniel Cho, whose small factory had been set to produce her first run of 5,000 units, was apologetic in the way people are when they've been scared. "Ms. Reyes, I'm so sorry. We've had to cancel your contract." She went still. "What? Why? We signed." "We received a significant new client last week. Large volume, multi-year commitment. We simply don't have the capacity anymore. Our lawyers will handle the termination terms." She asked the name of the new client. A pause. "I'm not at liberty, Daniel." Her voice was velvet over concrete. "Please." Another pause. Then, Reyes Group Commercial Properties. They needed storage and distribution infrastructure for a new warehouse portfolio. Reyes Group. Her father's company. She sat with that for a long time. long enough for the evening to turn to night outside her window, long enough for her to understand that this hadn't been a coincidence. Warren Reyes had not simply laughed at her dream. He had hunted it. She called Derek to make sure she wasn't being paranoid. He picked up on the second ring, and she could hear a television in the background, a game, crowd noise, ordinary life. "Did Dad do something to my manufacturer?" she asked. 3 seconds of silence. 3 seconds that said everything. "Catalina, did he? He was protecting you. He said you were about to lose your savings on something that wasn't going to work, and he just..." She hung up. She called her web developer next. Jenna Park, 24 years old, brilliant, had built Catalina's entire e-commerce platform from scratch. Jenna answered and immediately started apologizing. And Catalina understood before the words were even formed that she too had been offered something, a job at a firm connected to a Reyes Group partner, too well-timed to be anything but purchased. Jenna had taken it. She needed the money. Catalina didn't blame her. She went to the school districts. Next two had received anonymous tips that Heartfelt was not properly certified for child safety standards. False. Completely false. But enough to make cautious administrators pause. He hadn't just mocked her. He had systematically, methodically, quietly dismantled everything she had built. She thought about calling her mother. She picked up the phone. She put it back down. Patricia would listen with kind eyes, and then say something about Warren meaning well. And Catalina couldn't survive that particular cruelty tonight. Instead, she opened her laptop and looked at her bank account. $62,000. Her savings. Her real estate salary carefully kept. Money she had never spent because she had always believed she was building towards something. She looked at the golden bear on her desk. Brave. She thought about crying again. About calling friends, going out, drowning this in wine and bad decisions. She thought about writing her father a message so full of controlled fury it would strip paint off walls. She did none of those things. She opened a new document. She typed a single line at the top. What does he actually need from me? And then she began to think. Grief, when it's deep enough, doesn't announce itself. It doesn't roar. It builds a room inside you, locks the door, and decorates the walls with everything you used to believe. Catalina spent 2 weeks in that room. She went to work. She smiled in meetings. She sent her father a brief, warm email thanking him for his concern about her finances and letting him know she had decided to shelve the project for now. She watched him reply with 3 sentences of magnanimous satisfaction, and she felt something inside her turn cold and deliberate, like a key completing its rotation in a lock. He thought he'd won. That was important. Winners stopped watching. She began researching in the quiet hours midnight to 3 a.m., after the apartment building went silent, and the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car on the street below. She wasn't looking for revenge yet. She was looking for understanding. She needed to know her father's company the way a surgeon knows anatomy, not to admire it, but to know exactly where to cut. What she found surprised her. Reyes Group was struggling. Not publicly, Warren was too skilled for that, but in the numbers, in the margins, in the deferred maintenance on 3 commercial properties in the southwest suburbs, in the refinancing terms on a downtown portfolio that had been quietly renegotiated at unfavorable rates. The company looked powerful from the outside. From the inside, it was a house with beautiful walls and a compromised foundation. She also found something else. Reyes Group had been trying unsuccessfully for 2 years to break into the educational and institutional sector school districts, children's hospitals, community centers. They'd hired 2 consultants and gotten nowhere. The problem was brand perception. Reyes Group read as cold, corporate, developer, brained. Institutions that served children didn't want to partner with a company that felt like a parking garage. Catalina sat with this information for several nights. She thought about her father's voice at that dinner table. Your grandfather built something real. I built something real. She thought about the bear. Brave. She thought about the moral question that had been circling her since that parking lot in March, the one she couldn't silence. Is this revenge? Or is this just building what I was always going to build? The answer, she decided, was yes. Both. And that's fine. She found a new manufacturer smaller, based in Indiana. Family-owned, hungry for a serious long-term client. She rebuilt her relationship with Jenna Park, not asking her to leave her new job, but hiring her for 15 hours a week of freelance work because Jenna still believed in heartfelt and loyalty, Catalina had learned, flows toward people who respect it. She spent 4 months rebuilding the company from scratch. Leaner, smarter. She got the proper safety certifications, not because she needed to defend against her father's lies, but because she wanted the paperwork to be so thorough it would embarrass the people who had questioned it. She did not tell anyone what she was really doing. Not her mother, not Derek, not even her closest friend, Maya, who kept asking why she seemed different, quieter, somehow, but also more solid, like a woman who had finally figured out which direction was north. She was preparing the board. Now she needed to make the move. In January, 9 months after Warren Reyes had laughed at a golden bear over a breadbasket, Heartfelt launched. Catalina didn't do a press release. She didn't do a social media blitz. She did something more surgical. She went directly to the 3 school districts that had been poisoned against her, showed up in person with documentation, samples, and a partnership proposal that was so financially favorable to them that the decision felt inevitable. 2 signed within a week. The 3rd followed a month later. From there, word moved the way it moves in institutional circles quietly, through email chains and administrator conferences, and the particular trust network of people who work with children for a living. By March, Heartfelt had partnerships with 11 school districts, 2 children's hospitals, and a national pediatric therapy network. Revenue in the first quarter, $412,000. She hired a small team. She moved out of her apartment and into a proper office space, small, clean, a window that faced east. She gave her 2 weeks' notice at Reyes Group on a Wednesday afternoon, leaving a letter on her father's desk while he was in a meeting, because she had decided he didn't deserve a dramatic scene. He called her that evening, confused more than angry. "You're leaving? Now? Catalina, what is—" "I found my direction, Dad. I appreciate everything the firm taught me." A pause. "This is about the toy thing. It's about Heartfelt," she said. "The company, which is doing well." She heard him shift, recalibrate. "How well?" "Well enough." She smiled at the east-facing window. "I'll see you at Christmas." She let him live in uncertainty for 60 days. Let him hear things through channels, a mention in a Chicago business journal, a feature in a parenting magazine, a quote from a school superintendent who called Heartfelt the most thoughtful educational brand we've partnered with in a decade. Then she made her move. Through a carefully constructed series of introductions, a mutual contact at a nonprofit gala, a follow-up email from a board member Catalina had cultivated for exactly this moment, she arranged for Heartfelt to be presented to the 3 institutional clients that Reyes Group had been chasing for 2 years. Not as a competitor, as a gateway. She proposed a co-branding partnership. Heartfelt's emotional credibility and institutional relationships combined with Reyes Group's real estate infrastructure. Schools that loved Heartfelt would be introduced to Reyes Group for facility development. Children's hospitals expanding their physical footprint would receive a warm referral. The institutions loved it. They trusted Heartfelt. By extension, they were willing to trust Reyes Group. Warren's VP of Business Development called Catalina to discuss terms. She negotiated with the calm of someone who already knew every number in the room. She got everything she asked for, including, written into the co-branding contract, a clause that required Reyes Group to designate a company liaison who would report directly to Heartfelt's partnership board. She proposed her father for the role. It was, on the surface, an honor. The day Catalina Reyes walked into Reyes Group's conference room to formally execute the partnership, she wore the same blazer she'd worn to her first day of work there 4 years ago. She had kept it in her closet, not out of sentimentality, but out of intention, the way soldiers keep a specific thing for a specific moment. Warren was already seated, Derek beside him, 2 attorneys, a VP, the look of men who had prepared to be impressive. She sat across from them and opened her folder and did not smile first. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. When it was over, the partnership was signed, the terms were documented, and Warren Reyes, founder of Reyes Group, man who had laughed at a stuffed bear, was formally appointed as institutional liaison to Heartfelt's partnership board. He reported to her. She didn't say anything about it. She didn't need to. The architecture spoke for itself. It was Derek who called her 2 days later, and his voice had lost its usual easy certainty. He sounded like a man trying to locate the floor in a darkened room. "Did you plan this?" he asked. "Plan what?" "All of it. The partnerships, the contract, the Catalina." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I built a company, Derek." "You built it at him." She considered denying it. She considered the comfortable lie of pure innocence. The story where she was simply a businesswoman who happened to outmaneuver her father by accident. She had rehearsed that version. It was cleaner. But she was done with clean stories that protected people who hadn't protected her. "He dismantled everything I built," she said quietly, "piece by piece. He called my manufacturer. He bought my developer. He sent false safety complaints to my school districts. I know you knew." She let that sit. "I didn't go to the press. I didn't go to his board. I didn't burn anything down. I just built something better and made sure he needed it." Derek was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was different, scraped of something. "He's been telling people the partnership was his idea." "I know. Are you going to correct them?" "No," she said. "Let him have the story. I have the contract." She hung up and stood at her east-facing window for a while. Here was the thing about revenge that no one told you. It didn't feel the way you thought it would. She had expected triumph, clean and loud. What she felt instead was something quieter and stranger, a settling, like a building after an earthquake, when the structure finally finds its new equilibrium. But there was one more thing, one piece she hadn't anticipated. Her mother called that evening. Patricia Reyes, who had spent 30 years reaching for water glasses instead of speaking, called and asked if she could come by. She arrived with red eyes and a bottle of wine she didn't open. "I knew," Patricia said, "about the manufacturer, about the developer. I knew what he was doing, and I didn't stop him." She looked at her hands. "I've known for 30 years what kind of man he is when he feels threatened by someone he loves." Someone he loves. The words landed strangely. "Why are you telling me this now?" Catalina asked. "Because watching what you built, watching you do what you did, without becoming him." Her mother's voice broke. "I needed you to know that I see you, that I always saw you, and that I'm sorry I kept reaching for the water glass." Catalina thought about what to say. She thought about the bear on her desk, the word stitched across its chest. She thought about the difference between victory and freedom. "Stay for dinner," she said finally. Patricia nodded and wiped her eyes, and the two of them sat together in the apartment where a company had been rebuilt from nothing, and they talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Later, after her mother left and the city went dark outside the east window, Catalina wrote in the small journal she kept beside her desk. She had been writing in it since March of the previous year, since the parking lot, since the tears that weren't sadness. She wrote one line. "The most dangerous thing you can do to a person who underestimates you is simply become exactly who you always were." She closed the journal. She turned off the light. The most powerful revenge isn't destruction, it's construction. Build something so undeniably real that the people who laughed at you have no choice but to need it. Because in the end, the world doesn't remember who mocked the dream. It only remembers who built it.